This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 26th of March 2021, and I am 2J.
I'm Tuum.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. Yeah. In the Daily Nation, the KCSE scandal. In the Standard, Raila Ruto read from the same script. And in the Star, Raila's secret card as ex-NASA allies unveil new alliance and other stories.
Yes. Wow, what a mouthful.
It was indeed. Yeah. What will we be reviewing?
Now look, a Ruto-Raila alliance is an insult to a national imagination. And here is why. One, if Raila Odinga and William Ruto ran on a joint ticket, what would that look like? What would the numbers look like? Ruto would bring 2.3 million Kalenjin votes, and Raila would bring the same, 2.3 million Luo votes. Total, 4.6 million votes. This would be equivalent to 30% of the total vote of 15 million votes in 2017. That is a joke.
Yep.
And that's because Raila already has a 44% hold of the country. From 2007 to 2017, Raila has always attained 44% of the total national vote. So why would he agree to lose a whole 14%? That would constitute political nonsense. Two, do you think Raila would want to run as Ruto's deputy? Raila Odinga, the enigma. Raila, the man in charge of Africa's infrastructure. The people's president, to run as a running mate to the chicken seller. Where would his mind be if he was Ruto's running mate? And we say this because there would be no other way.
Yeah.
Ruto cannot run as a deputy to Raila. The constitution bars him. Can you imagine Ruto chairing a cabinet meeting and Raila is taking notes? Wouldn't we have lost it as a nation? And finally, three, how would Ruto convince Kikuyus to let go of their running mate position for Raila Odinga? Imagine selling a Ruto-Raila ticket in Gatondo South or Kakima or Nyandarua. I mean, would Ruto be foolish enough to let go of 30% of Kema's 5.6 million vote? Ladies and gentlemen, the pusher of the Ruto-Raila candidature is William Ruto himself. But it's a whimsical strategy. It is a Mickey Mouse strategy. And we will repeat it. It is an insult to a national imagination. The truth is simple. Ruto's hustler strategy has fulized its shelf life. The man is clutching at straws. He's groping in the dark. Ruto is like a man in a dark room looking for a black cat that does not exist. He knows it is over. Kalas.
He has fulized. So today, I want us to explore this idea that Tuum has brought up of a Ruto-Raila alliance, and that's in the newspapers as well.
Yeah.
And we can use the lens of what is known as a Faustian bargain. In colloquial terms, it is also known as the deal with the devil. So Faustian bargains are the deals that one makes to get what they want. Simple. And in the classic story by Goethe, the character Faust makes a deal with the devil, exchanging his soul for knowledge. And the idea of a Faustian bargain has long been a tradition of storytelling, where the willingness to abandon one's principles or even eternal value for worldly benefit highlights our greed and thirst for power. So looking back, guys, we can see why UHURU would have made the deal he made in 2013. Ultimately, UHURU has been a politician seeking after the light as he sees it. He joined forces with William Ruto back then because it served a political end, one that was successful. The bargain or the deal he made next was actually the handshake with Raila in 2018. So in Kenya's political history, there have been many such bargains. In 2008, Kibaki made one with Raila, and now it has been proposed that Raila and Ruto may be attempting another one. Raila should not assume, though, that Ruto will subordinate his political desires for Raila Odinga. He shouldn't assume that. And after all, there is no decency in politics. If Ruto did not play his role in Huru's term, what makes us think that this time it will be different? The common denominator with why Faustian bargains backfire is that often people misjudge those they enter into the deal with. The story is often a mixture of underestimation and self-interest. So here's a quick story. of a famous Faustian bargain. In 1933, former Chancellor, Franz von Papen and President Otto von Hindenburg, i.e. the elites, those controlling the economic, political and military establishment of Germany at the time, struck a deal to support Hitler. They did this because Hitler promised to crush the political left, destroy trade unions, eviscerate parliament and launch rearmament. They invited Hitler into power. And then he became larger than life. He crushed the opposition and gained popularity. It was more than they could ever control. Take from that what you wish.
Beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful.
I think in our view, it's quite obvious what William Ruto is doing. If you're losing the game, you change the rules. And so in being obvious, Ruto is playing the classic keep your friends close and your enemies closer. This guy has been on a losing streak and he's desperate to regain some ground. But this man has shown us who he is. So the question is, are we going to be fooled? And this reminded me of a story from the Bible of King Solomon and two mothers. Once upon a time, there were two women who lived in the same house, and each of them had an infant son. One night, one of the women lay on her baby and she killed him. Then she quickly switched him with the living one, as the mother of the other baby slept. In the morning, the two mothers fought. They each claimed that the living baby was theirs, and to resolve the fight, they went to King Solomon. When Solomon listened to their stories, he ordered that the living baby be split in two. This way, each mother would take half a baby. One mother had no problem with this decision made by the king, and she said that if she could not have the baby, neither of them could.
Right.
But the other mother screamed in horror, begging Solomon, just give her the baby, just don't kill him. At this point, Solomon knew who the real mother was. As a real mother would give up her baby if the result was to save his life.
Right.
Right now, Kenya is battling an evil mother who is content with tearing the country in two. Can we afford to lose 1 trillion shillings every 5 years electing a president? Are we happy to lose 1,000 Kenyan brothers and sisters in the process of putting someone in power? The only answer to these questions should be no. Like King Solomon, we must pass judgment, but we must also use wisdom to discern which mother would rather see Kenya ripped in two and who is out to save our lives.
Wow, powerful words there.
Beautiful. And now our final thought. It is inspired by the case The State versus Nelson Mandela, a trial that changed South Africa.
Well, before we get there, can I give a summary of the week?
Please go ahead.
This week we were looking at famous trials, and we began by looking at the trial of Jesus Christ of Nazareth versus the Sanhedrin. And no other trial in human history has significantly affected the course of human events like that of Jesus. We asked why there was a trial and not simply the assassination of Jesus. The answer is in the Sanhedrin interpretation of their own laws that say that if death comes by assassination, the one who kills is guilty before the law, and the one who is killed is innocent. But if death is a result of a judicial process, the opposite is true. And that's what the priests wanted. Jesus condemned as a guilty lawbreaker while they appear as the righteous upholders of the law of God. On Wednesday, we looked back at the Kapenguria 6 trial. We recounted the events that preceded the trial, from the death of senior Chief Warohio to the declared state of emergency and arrest of 180 political leaders, including the 6 executive committee members of COW. We discussed how the colonial government brought through the bribing of the judge and the fabricated story of the key witness, systematically ensured that the 6 would be starved of a free trial, and so they were imprisoned and forced to serve 7 years of hard labor. On Thursday, we looked at the case regarding the 2000 presidential election results between Al Gore and George Bush. And during this time, the US was plunged into 36 days of turmoil, as there was uncertainty about the results from Florida, the key state for winning the presidency. Gore was initially declared the winner, but Florida gave the victory to Bush. Both candidates contested the Florida results, which were eventually taken up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Bush, but it was noted that if a manual count had been conducted, Gore would have probably been a winner. So that was a document that changed the course of history. And today we're looking at the state versus Nelson Mandela.
Exactly. Absolutely. And this case is actually also known as the Rivonia trial.
Yeah.
And it takes its name from the suburb in Johannesburg where leaders had been arrested and their documents found at a farm called Lily's Leaf. Various people and groups, including the African National Congress, had been using it as a hideout. So, among others, Nelson Mandela had started hiding on the farm in October of 1961, and he evaded security and police while masquerading as a gardener and a cook called David Motsayami, which meant David the Walker. So on 11th July 1963, the police raided this Lily's Leaf farm in Rivonia and arrested alleged members of the right arm of the ANC, the African National Congress. And together with Nelson Mandela, who had already been arrested a couple of months before, they were put on trial and charged with conspiring to overthrow the apartheid government by violent revolution. And they were charged with 221 acts of sabotage that they believed were designed to foment violent revolution. And their expected punishment was actually death. So the Rivonia trial was the first time that the state had used this thing called the Sabotage Act to not only ban the ANC and the Pan-Africanist Congress, the PAC, but they used it then also to arrest and charge them with all these various crimes. So at this trial, Nelson Mandela used this opportunity to proclaim the aims and goals of the ANC. They say that he and his co-counsel had no interest at all in restricting themselves to what he called a straight legal defense. They decided that they wanted to go on the political offensive. So they used the courtroom to explain precisely what they were doing and why they were doing it. They wanted to put on the record, to set the record straight, these false things that the government was saying about them. So the first pillar of their strategy was not to even defend themselves against the evidence that the prosecution had. They wanted to focus on telling the truth and exposing the lies of the state. So at the beginning of the defense's proceedings, Nelson Mandela gave a 3-hour speech on the dock in which he defended and explained the ANC's key political positions. And I think most of us know this. This speech has been come to be known as the I am prepared to die speech.
Correct.
Which came from his closing words. And I'll just quote what he said. He said, "During my lifetime, I have dedicated my life to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination. I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all peoples will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal for which I hope to live for and to see realized.
Right.
But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal which I am prepared to die for."
Oh, powerful words.
Very.
Now, Tuje, when I read the South African struggle for self-rule, I really do get the feeling that they give white people a lot of space to mess with them. Look, Kenya's fight for independence, I would like to think, was far more brutal than any other that I have seen or read about, at least in Africa.
Okay.
And that's why the British, in my view, gave in so early. I'm almost convinced that the more blood was spilled, the more the colonizers were willing to give in. And I feel Mandela wouldn't have spent all that time should he have had a more revolutionary stand. Listen to this, an excerpt of Nelson Mandela's speech at the beginning of the trial. "Above all, we want equal rights because without them, our disabilities will be permanent." Excellent. I know this sounds revolutionary to the whites in this country because the majority of voters will be Africans. This makes the white man fear democracy. But this fear cannot be allowed to stand in the way of the only solution which will guarantee racial harmony and freedom for all. It is not true that the enfranchisement of all will result in racial domination. Political division based on color is entirely artificial, and when it disappears, so will the domination of one color group by another. The ANC has spent half a century fighting against racialism. When it triumphs, it will not change that policy. This, then, is what the ANC is fighting. Their struggle is a truly national one. It is a struggle of the African people, inspired by their own suffering and their own experience. It is a struggle for the right to live. And
Are you giving the 3-hour speech?
Yes. Now I'm coming to what you said earlier. During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination and I have fought against black domination. Hey, I have cherished the ideal of democratic and a free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if it needs to be, it's an ideal for which I'm prepared to die. That's what you said. Now look, I like how he ended it. But if he meant to sound revolutionary, he actually sounded apologetic. Apologetic for fighting for what was his own dignity, land, and right to self-govern. But then again, for a man who spent that long in prison, he deserves some respect. Viva Nelson.
I'm entirely confused as to what your point was.
The point is simple. By the time you're saying...
You wanted more bloodshed.
Yeah, look, he said, during my lifetime, I've dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I fought against white domination, I fought against black domination. Why are you sounding like, you know, all you want is black domination? For goodness sake, they're the majority.
So it's interesting because I actually focused on sort of how prophetic and appealing his language actually was, how that speech was so important.
Please, yes,
and
turn this around, GK.
And how that speech was actually a turning point for South Africa, actually, and the rest of Africa.
Yeah.
So he uses words and phrases that are capable of sort of reinventing the political universe. They're sort of called touchstone phrases.
Yeah.
They resist what apartheid affirms at every point. It reveals what it hides and amplifies what it silences. Mandela found words to register the grievances and injustices and the hegemonic language of law that law was incapable of sort of hearing or representing. And I like when he said, you know, I am a black man in a white man's court. I thought that was so profound. And that was in the incitement trial, because there were 3 trials within this, right? And it was this powerful language that I think people couldn't ignore. The world couldn't ignore. So much so, guys, that UNESCO has actually got this thing called a Memory of the World Register. And the Rivonia trial is actually recognized as one of these things that changed the world, one of the most momentous legal events in the 20th century. What I also like was his appeal to ethics and morality, to reason and conscience, to justice, to the common thread that runs through all the trials, but also through what all Black South Africans were feeling. I also like that he defended his ability to break law. That the white man had left them with no sort of options but to start breaking the law. I like that he had explored all other options, you know, the peaceful resistance and whatnot. And, you know, according to 2M, he should have done more, but he got there perhaps too late. So he says, law breaking was a necessary condition under which true law can renew its promise to justice and redeem the dignity and humanity of blacks in South Africa. So that really touched me. I really like that he gave the power of argument and stories in his speech. It was a long speech, but I think it was important for him to sort of give the eyes of what was going on in South Africa to the rest of the world. And I think that's what was so fundamental and earth-shaking about this speech. So I'll end with that.
I have a question for 2M.
Yeah.
Was MLK a revolutionary?
Martin Luther King?
Yes.
I prefer Malcolm X.
Was Martin, answer the question.
2M is choosing violence.
Answer the question, was Martin Luther King a revolutionary?
And that's why I said I prefer Malcolm X.
Okay, but no, was Malcolm X a revolutionary?
And by the way, you will not corner me in answer.
Was Malcolm X, these are both men who, according to your criteria for what a revolutionary ought to be, they had to have shed blood.
If Nelson Mandela wanted to do a covenant with white people,
oh my gosh,
he should have just known this, that covenants without swords are nothing but mere words.
Nice.
You opened up your prof quote book today.
So there's a book I think everyone should read if you are interested in this. It's called What If There Were No Whites, basically in South Africa. And it's a really interesting book outlining what could have happened had the whites never come. I'll end with this. No one thought that this encounter between a black man and a white man's court could lay the foundations, not only for a radical possibility, but also for a new way of life in South Africa. So I encourage you all, in your lives today, be audacious, have daring encounters.
Shed blood?
Perhaps not shed blood. I think there's other ways to get what you want. Have a lovely weekend. Find us on YouTube, subscribe, and we're also on TV, Go TV, Pine Free to Air, and Start.